My name is Liam, I'm 31, and for most of my life, I've built things. I started with rickety tree houses, moved on to custom furniture in my garage, and now, I build homes from the ground up. I build things that last, things with solid foundations. It's a principle I've tried to apply to my entire life, which is why the phone call I received on a Tuesday afternoon felt like a seismic shock, threatening to bring everything crashing down. My father's voice was booming through the speaker, artificially cheerful. Liam. Great news, son. Your mother and I are at the lawyer's office right now. We've done it. I was on a job site, the scent of sawdust and fresh paint in the air. I braced my phone between my ear and shoulder, signaling for my crew to take a 5-minute break. Done what, Dad? I asked, my voice wary. I'd learned long ago that my parents' great news rarely translated into anything good for me. We bought Chloe a house, he exclaimed. A beautiful 4-bedroom colonial over in the Willows. It's got a yard for the dog she'll eventually get, a great school district, we're setting her up for life, son. I felt a familiar, dull ache spread through my chest. Chloe, my younger sister. The golden child. Of course. I forced a neutral tone. Wow. It's a big step. How'd you swing that? There was a brief pause, and then my mother's voice joined the call, syrupy sweet. Well, that's the other part of the good news, sweetie. It's a family effort. I gripped my phone tighter, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I knew what was coming. I knew it as surely as I knew which support beams were load-bearing. My father cleared his throat, taking back control of the conversation. We've put the down payment on it, using a little from our retirement, but the bank, you know how they are, they want to see a stable income stream for the mortgage. Chloe's still figuring things out with her little online shop. My silence was a chasm, but he barreled right over it. So, we've decided you'll be handling the monthly payments. We're having the paper sent to your address. It's all taken care of. You just need to sign. They hadn't asked. They had decided. They had bought my sister a house and handed me the bill as if it were my sworn duty, my sole purpose for existing. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All I could hear was the distant buzz of a saw and the frantic pounding of my own heart. They thought I was the same quiet, compliant boy who always cleaned up their messes. They thought I was still just their dependable handyman, living paycheck to paycheck. They had no idea who I had become. They had no idea about the foundation I had secretly, meticulously built for myself, far away from their toxic expectations. They thought they had me trapped. What they didn't know was that I was the one holding all the cards. Before I continue with this story, and tell you exactly how I turned the tables on my own family, do me a favor. If you've ever been made to feel like the family ATM, the built-in babysitter, or the forgotten child, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to be the responsible one while someone else got a free pass. Your story matters, and I want to hear it. The foundation for that disastrous phone call was laid decades ago, in the soil of my childhood. Our family was a carefully constructed ecosystem with two distinct roles. My sister, Chloe, was the orchid, delicate, beautiful, and demanding constant attention and the perfect conditions to thrive. I was the sturdy, unremarkable cactus in the corner, praised only for my ability to survive on neglect. It wasn't a role I chose, it was assigned to me from the moment Chloe was born. She was the charming, bubbly one, the one who could light up a room with a smile and talk her way out of any trouble. I was quiet, observant, and serious. Our parents interpreted these traits in the most convenient way possible. Chloe's irresponsibility was creative free-spiritedness, my responsibility was just expected. The disparities were everywhere. For her 16th birthday, a brand new, cherry-red convertible appeared in the driveway, tied with a giant bow. The story was that she needed a reliable car to get to her part-time job at the mall, a job she held for less than a month. When I turned 16, I asked about getting a car. My father clapped me on the back and said, "That's great, son. A car is a big responsibility. Shows character to want to earn one for yourself, so I did." I worked every weekend at a local garage, my hands perpetually stained with grease, and saved up for a 20-year-old pickup truck that smelled like rust and gasoline. They praised my work ethic, never once acknowledging that they had forced it upon me. When it came time for college, Chloe was accepted into an expensive liberal arts school 2 states away. My parents proudly announced they were covering her tuition, room, and board. An investment in her future, my father declared. When I graduated high school with honors and a clear aptitude for engineering and design, I was sat down for another one of those character-building talks. They told me college was important, but that I was so independent and resourceful, they knew I could figure it out on my own. Student loans, they suggested. Or maybe a community college while I worked. They didn't have the money, they said, having just committed to Chloe's 4-year ride. The message was clear, her dreams were an investment, mine were a liability. I felt a cold, hard anger settle in my gut that day, but I didn't show it. I just nodded, thanked them for their honesty, and started making my own plans. It was never about the money, not really. It was about the validation. Chloe's every minor achievement was celebrated with dinners out and gushing phone calls to relatives. My successes were met with a distracted, "Oh, that's nice, honey, I was the family fixer." When Chloe dented her new car, I was the one who learned how to patch the bodywork so she wouldn't get in trouble. When her grades slipped in college, I was the one who spent hours on the phone, tutoring her in subjects I hadn't even taken, because my parents were too worried to function. I was a tool, a resource. My primary value was in my utility to them and, more specifically, to Chloe. This constant neglect, this blatant favoritism, didn't break me. It forged me. It forced me to become utterly self-reliant. I learned that if I wanted something, I had to build it, earn it, and protect it myself. And so I did, brick by painful brick. Instead of drowning myself in student debt for a degree they wouldn't have valued anyway, I took a different path. I walked away from the traditional college route and into the workshop of a man named Frank Henderson. Mr. Henderson was a local legend, a semi-retired contractor who built some of the most beautiful and structurally sound homes in the county. He was old school, with calloused hands, a no-nonsense attitude, and an eye for detail that bordered on obsessive. I had worked for him on and off during high school summers, and unlike my parents, he didn't see a quiet, useful kid, he saw potential. He saw the way I studied blueprints, the care I took in measuring cuts, and the satisfaction I got from a perfectly joined corner. He saw a builder. "Forget those 4-year schools, Liam," he told me one afternoon, spitting tobacco juice into a coffee can. "They'll teach you theory. I'll teach you reality. You've got the knack. Stick with me, and I'll make a master craftsman out of you." That was the first time a father figure had ever looked at me and seen something more than just a means to an end. It was all the validation I needed. For the next 5 years, Mr. Henderson became the father I never really had. I was his apprentice, his shadow. I learned everything: framing, plumbing, electrical, fine cabinetry, and most importantly, the business of it all. He taught me how to bid jobs, manage crews, and navigate the labyrinth of permits and inspections. While Chloe was away at college, posting pictures of parties and spring break trips, all funded by my parents, I was living in a tiny apartment above a garage, saving every single dollar I could. I drove my old beater truck until the wheels practically fell off. I packed my own lunches. I didn't take vacations. My family saw it as proof that I was struggling, that I was just a blue-collar laborer going nowhere. They'd call and say things like, "Oh, honey, are you eating enough? Maybe Chloe can send you some money from her allowance." The irony was so thick it was suffocating. They had no idea I was socking away thousands of dollars, building a war chest for my future. They had no idea that Mr. Henderson was paying me a handsome wage because, as he put it, "You do the work of 3 men." When I was 25, Mr. Henderson announced his full retirement. He sat me down in his dusty office. "I'm selling the business assets," he said. "And I'm selling them to you." For $1 I was stunned. He helped me draw up the paperwork to launch my own company, Precision Homes LLC. He even co-signed the initial business loan I needed for equipment, telling the skeptical bank manager, "This boy's word is better than any contract, and his work is better than his word." Over the next 5 years, Precision Homes grew quietly and steadily. I started with small renovations and additions, building a reputation for being meticulous, reliable, and honest. Word of mouth was my only advertising. Soon, I was getting calls for custom home builds, the kind of high-end projects Mr. Henderson used to do. I never flaunted it. I still drove a modest truck, a newer one, but nothing flashy. I moved into a small, respectable house that I'd renovated myself. To my family, I was still just Liam, the handyman they thought I was fixing leaky faucets and patching drywall. They had no concept of architectural plans, budget management for million-dollar projects, or the stress of managing a dozen subcontractors. My success was my secret, a private victory. It was my shield, built from their neglect. I knew, somewhere deep down, that a day of reckoning would come. I just never imagined it would arrive in the form of mortgage papers for a house I would never live in. The email arrived less than an hour after that fateful phone call. The subject line was simply, "House Docs." The body of the email, from my mother, was sickeningly cheerful. "Hi, sweetie. Here are the papers we talked about. The lawyer said you just need to sign where the tabs are and set up the auto draft from your bank account. The first payment is due on the 1st of next month. Isn't this exciting? We're so proud of Chloe. Love, Mom." Attached was a PDF file. I clicked it open, a sense of dread washing over me. It was worse than I imagined. The house was a sprawling new construction, complete with glossy photos. For bedrooms, 3.5 baths, a gourmet kitchen, a 3-car garage. The price tag made my breath catch in my throat. The monthly mortgage payment was more than what I paid for my own modest home, a home I had worked and saved for a decade to afford responsibly. It was a monument to their delusion and Chloe's entitlement. My father called back an hour later, his tone now stripped of the fake excitement and full of businesslike authority. "Liam, you get the papers? Everything clear?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dad, we need to talk about this." "I never agreed to it," he scoffed, a sound of pure disbelief. "What's there to agree to? It's family. Chloe needs a good start, a stable home. She's getting engaged to that fellow, Mark. They can't start a life together in her tiny apartment. You, on the other hand, you're single, you're good with money, and you have a steady trade. It's your duty to help out. This is what a good son does." His words were like hammer blows. Not a request, but a decree. He was defining my role, my purpose, based on their needs. The sheer arrogance of it was staggering. "My trade, as you call it, doesn't mean I have an endless supply of cash," I said, my voice hardening. "This is a massive financial commitment." That's when my mother got on the extension. Her weapon of choice was never anger, it was guilt. "Liam, please don't be difficult," she began, her voice quivering with manufactured hurt. "We've done so much for you over the years. We've always supported you. Don't you want to see your sister happy? Think of all the sacrifices we've made." I almost laughed. Sacrifices? What sacrifices? Paying for the child they favored while telling the other to fend for himself? The gaslighting was so ingrained, so reflexive, they probably believed it themselves. "I have to go," I said abruptly, my hand shaking. I couldn't listen to any more. I hung up before they could protest. The silence of my office was deafening. I felt like a child again, small and voiceless. But I wasn't a child anymore. I immediately called the one person who saw the full picture, the one who had helped me see the toxicity for what it was, my girlfriend, Sarah. I'd met her a year after starting my company. She was a landscape architect, and we'd collaborated on a project. She was smart, grounded, and saw right through the facade. When I explained the situation, her silence on the other end of the line was heavy with rage. "Liam," she finally said, her voice dangerously calm. "They did not. They actually, literally, bought a house and assigned you the debt like you're a subsidiary of their corporation. Hearing her frame it so bluntly cut through my emotional fog. "That's about the size of it," I mumbled. "You are not signing a single thing," she said, her voice fierce with protective anger. "You are not sending them 1 cent. This is insane. This is beyond anything they've ever pulled before. This is the last straw, Liam. You have to make it the last straw." She was right. This wasn't just another instance of favoritism. This was a line drawn not in the sand, but in concrete. And they had just dared me to cross it. My family, in their infinite arrogance, decided to celebrate their grand acquisition with a massive party. It was billed as a combination housewarming for Chloe and an engagement party for her and her fiancé, Mark, a man who seemed to have no discernible career but was very good at wearing expensive watches. The invitations went out to the entire extended family and all their friends. My invitation, of course, was a summons. "Be there," my mother had chirped over the phone. "Everyone is so excited to see the house and to thank you for your incredible generosity." They were creating a narrative, painting me as the benevolent, wealthy brother happily funding his sister's fairy tale. They were trying to publicly lock me into this arrangement, assuming I wouldn't dare cause a scene in front of dozens of people. It was a classic manipulation tactic, and in the past, it would have worked. But they had miscalculated. They had pushed me too far. Sarah and I discussed it at length. My first instinct was to just not show up, to send a curt email declining their offer and cut them off. But Sarah, with her brilliant, strategic mind, saw a different path. "No, Liam," she said, her eyes gleaming. "You have to go. This isn't a battle you can win over the phone. They've created a public stage. You need to use it. You need to take back your own story. In front of everyone they're lying to." She was right. Hiding would only feed their narrative that I was difficult and ungrateful. I needed to face them directly. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I met with my accountant and got a clear, concise summary of my company's financial health and current projects. I didn't need to do it, but I wanted the facts to be my armor. The day of the party, I felt a strange sense of calm. As Sarah and I pulled up to the absurdly large house, I saw my father standing on the porch, greeting guests like the lord of the manor. When he saw me, he beamed, striding over to wrap an arm around my shoulders. "There he is," he boomed for all to hear. "The man of the hour. The foundation of this whole dream." I just smiled thinly and let him lead me inside. The house was filled with people. My mother rushed over and kissed my cheek, whispering, "Everyone is so impressed with you, honey." Chloe, glowing in a white dress, gave me an airy hug. Thank you, Liam," she breathed. "You've made me the happiest girl in the world." It was all a performance, and I was the unwilling star. About an hour into the party, my father clinked a champagne glass for attention. The room fell silent. He stood in the center of the grand living room, a smug, self-satisfied look on his face. "I'd like to thank you all for coming to celebrate 2 wonderful milestones," he began. "Chloe's new home, and her engagement to this fine young man, Mark." He rambled on for a bit before getting to the main event. "Now, a dream this big takes a family. Your mother and I were able to get the ball rolling, but it's a heavy lift. And that's where my son, Liam, stepped up. In an act of incredible generosity and family loyalty, Liam has taken on the financial responsibility for this home, ensuring his sister has the worry-free start she deserves. Let's all raise a glass to Liam." The room erupted in applause. People were looking at me, smiling, impressed. My mother was dabbing at her eyes. Chloe was beaming. This was my cue to be the humble hero. Instead, I calmly walked to the front of the room and took the microphone from my father's stunned hand. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my voice steady and clear, amplified through the speakers. "That was a beautiful speech. However, there are just a couple of small corrections I need to make." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. My father's smile faltered. "I wasn't actually asked if I would pay for this house, I was informed that I would be. And unfortunately, I have to decline." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. "You see, I can't afford this mortgage," I continued, locking eyes with my father. Because my company, Precision Homes, just broke ground on a 30-unit luxury townhouse development on the old waterfront property. All of my capital is tied up for the foreseeable future. I'm afraid I'm just a humble home builder. After all, the silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush new carpet. My parents' faces had gone from pride to chalk-white shock. Chloe looked as if she'd been slapped. The name Precision Homes and the mention of a 30-unit development landed like a bomb. They had no idea. They had no idea at all. The shock in the room was a physical thing, a tangible pressure. My father's jaw was slack, his face a mask of disbelief. My mother's hand flew to her chest, her carefully constructed party persona crumbling into dust. Chloe's radiant smile had vanished, replaced by a horrified, gaping expression. She looked from me to our parents and back again, the reality of the situation dawning on her. The crowd of guests was frozen, their champagne flutes halfway to their mouths, unsure of what they were witnessing. This was not part of the happy family script. I held the microphone, my grip firm, my voice unwavering. The panic I thought I would feel was absent, replaced by a cold, liberating clarity. For my entire life, I said, my gaze sweeping over my parents and sister, I have been the fixer. The responsible one. The one who was expected to be independent so that all the family resources, financial and emotional, could be directed toward Chloe. I was never given a new car. I was told to earn one. I was never offered a paid college education. I was told to figure it out on my own. And I let that hang in the air for a moment. I wasn't shouting. My tone was factual, almost conversational, which made it all the more devastating. I figured it out. I learned a trade from a good man who saw potential in me. I worked, I saved, and I built a business from nothing. I did it with no help, no encouragement, and no investment from my family. This success, I gestured around me, not at the house, but at myself, is mine. I earned it. I then turned my full attention to my parents. You cannot neglect a son for 30 years and then present him with a bill for his sister's dream life. That's not how family works. That's not love. It's exploitation. My father found his voice, a choked, furious whisper. How dare you, in front of all these people, you're the one who put me on this stage, Dad. I cut him off, my voice sharp for the first time. You created this public spectacle to force my hand. You were counting on me being too embarrassed to say no. You were wrong. I looked at Chloe. For a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of something, shame, maybe, before it was replaced by her usual entitlement. I wish you well, Chloe, I said, my voice softening slightly. I truly hope you and Mark have a happy life. But you will have to build it yourselves. The same way I had to build mine. With that, I set the microphone down on a nearby table. The metallic clink echoed in the cavernous silence. I turned to Sarah, who was standing near the door, her expression a mixture of profound pride and fierce love. She took my hand. I gave one last look at my family, now huddled together like survivors of a wreck. I am not your financial plan, I said, my voice low but carrying in the stillness. I am not your safety net. I am your son, and your brother. If you ever want a relationship based on that, and that alone, you know where to find me. Then, we turned and walked out the front door, leaving the entire party, the entire charade, behind us in stunned disbelief. The cool night air hit my face, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly free. The foundation I had built for myself had held. The aftermath was exactly as predictable and toxic as I had anticipated. The walk away from that party was liberating, but it was like walking out of the eye of a hurricane. The storm hit within the hour. My phone began to light up with a fury I had never seen before. First, it was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was a masterclass in emotional manipulation, a tear-soaked tirade about how I had humiliated them, how I had ruined Chloe's special night. How could I be so cruel and heartless after everything they'd done for me? She didn't mention the mortgage once. My crime wasn't refusing to pay it, it was revealing the truth in public. Next came the texts from my father. They were short, brutal, and filled with rage. "You are a disgrace. You have forgotten what family means. Do not contact us until you are ready to apologize for the disrespect you have shown." It was a transparent attempt to regain control, to frame me as the aggressor and them as the wounded victims. Then came Chloe's messages. They were a mix of pleading and accusation. "Liam, how could you do this to me? You've ruined everything. Mark is freaking out. You've always been jealous of me, haven't you? You just couldn't stand to see me happy." The idea that I was jealous was so ludicrous it was almost funny. I wasn't jealous of her life, I was horrified by the Abhängigkeit and lack of substance it was built on. I showed the messages to Sarah, who just shook her head. "Block them," she said simply. "For now, just block them. You don't need to absorb their poison." And so, I did. I blocked their numbers. It felt like a monumental act of defiance. For a few days, there was silence. Then the second wave of the attack began, this time through proxies. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, was the first to call. I almost didn't answer, but Aunt Carol had always been different. She was the sympathetic relative, the one who saw the family dynamics for what they were, even if she rarely spoke up. "Liam," she said, her voice hesitant. "I just wanted to say, I was at the party. And I know I'm probably not supposed to say this, but good for you." I was so taken aback I couldn't speak for a moment. "Thank you, Aunt Carol," I finally managed. "That means a lot," she sighed. "Your mother and father are on a warpath. They're calling everyone, telling them you're a selfish, ungrateful liar who got rich and forgot about his family. They're leaving out the part where they tried to saddle you with a $500,000 loan, of course. Some people are buying it. But those of us who have been paying attention for the last 30 years? We know what really happened. You just finally stood up for yourself." Her validation was a balm on a raw wound. It confirmed I wasn't crazy, that the injustice was real and visible to others. In the following weeks, I leaned heavily on my chosen family. I had dinner with Mr. Henderson, who listened to the whole story with a grim nod. "Knew it would come to a head someday," he grunted. "A rotten foundation will always crack. You did the right thing, boy." The only thing my crew at work, the men who had been with me for years, became a protective wall. They could see the stress I was under and doubled their efforts on the job site, ensuring our big project stayed on track. They were my real brothers, loyal and supportive in ways my own family had never been. Through it all, Sarah was my rock. She reminded me that their anger was a symptom of their loss of control. They weren't angry because I had hurt them, they were angry because I had refused to be used by them. Holding firm was excruciating, but every day that I didn't engage, every manipulative text I didn't answer, I felt another brick being laid in the foundation of my own self-respect. The world does not stop for family drama. While my parents were busy waging a smear campaign, the real world, with its deadlines and consequences, kept moving. They had co-signed a massive loan based on a fantasy, the fantasy that I was their personal bank. When that fantasy evaporated in the middle of a crowded party, they were left holding the very real, very heavy bag. The first mortgage payment came due. I know this because Aunt Carol gave me quiet updates. My parents, trying to save face and keep the dream alive for Chloe, scraped together the first payment out of their retirement savings. But it was a mortal wound to their finances. The payment was astronomical, and Chloe and Mark certainly couldn't cover it. Her online boutique of imported trinkets barely made enough to cover her lattes, and Mark, it turned out, was between opportunities, which was a permanent state of being for him. The second month, they missed the payment. The bank's polite reminder letters began to arrive. By the third month, the official notices were being posted. The beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in the Willows, Chloe's dream house, was in pre-foreclosure. The financial pressure shattered Chloe's fragile engagement. Mark, who had been so enthusiastic about living in a house paid for by his future brother-in-law, was suddenly less keen on sticking around to face debt collectors. He disappeared from the picture, and the engagement was unceremoniously called off. The humiliation for my family was immense. They had made such a public spectacle of the house and the engagement, and now it was all collapsing in an equally public way. To avoid the full legal process of foreclosure and bankruptcy, they were forced to sell their own home, the home I grew up in, to cover the down payment they'd lost and the associated penalties. They downsized to a small, rented condo on the other side of town. They were financially and emotionally devastated, brought low by the consequences of their own actions. I felt a strange mixture of emotions watching this unfold from a distance. There was no joy, no sense of "I told you so," it was just a profound, hollow sadness. It was the tragic, inevitable end to a story they had written themselves. While their world was falling apart, mine was being built. The townhouse development was a roaring success. We pre-sold 2/3 of the units before the foundations were even fully poured. My company's reputation soared. With my own future secure, I asked Sarah to marry me. We bought a beautiful piece of land, and I began designing our home myself, not a McMansion to show off, but a thoughtfully designed space that was perfect for us and well within our means. I also started seeing a therapist. Talking through the decades of neglect and emotional manipulation with a neutral third party was transformative. I learned to untangle my self-worth from their approval. I began to understand that I had been seeking their validation for so long, when the only validation that truly mattered had to come from within. I was healing. I was building a life of peace, stability, and genuine love, far from the toxic wreckage of my past. My foundation was no longer just about financial security, it was becoming emotional and psychological, too. And it was stronger than I had ever imagined. Months bled into a year. A year of quiet, productive work. A year of building a life with Sarah. A year of profound, uninterrupted peace. The silence from my family had been total since the disastrous fallout. I had learned through Aunt Carol that they were settled in their condo, that my father had taken on a part-time job to supplement their decimated retirement, and that Chloe was working as a receptionist at a dental office. The universe had served them a dose of reality far harsher than any lecture I could have delivered. I had accepted that this silence might be permanent, that the bridge had been burned beyond repair. I had made my peace with it. Then, one evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello?" There was a pause, and then a voice I hadn't heard in over a year, a voice stripped of its usual booming confidence, spoke my name. "Liam?" It's Dad." He sounded older, tired. The sound of him was so jarring I had to sit down. Sarah, sensing the shift in the room, came and stood behind me, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Dad," I said, my voice neutral. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," he said quickly. I wanted to call. To talk. The conversation was stilted and awkward. He asked about my work in a way he never had before, with genuine curiosity. He asked about Sarah. It was all surface level, but it was a start. Finally, after several long pauses, he got to the real reason for his call. "Listen, son," he started, and I could hear him take a shaky breath. "About what happened, about the house, about everything. I was wrong. Your mother and we were wrong. We took you for granted. We saw you as, well, we didn't see you at all, not really. Not for who you were. And I am so sorry for that. It's not a good apology. I'm not good at this. But it's the truth. The apology was imperfect, clumsy, and incomplete. But it was also the most honest thing my father had ever said to me. There was no blame shifting, no justification. Just a raw, humbled admission of fault. "Thank you for saying that, Dad," I replied, my own voice thick with emotion I hadn't expected. "That means a lot." He told me my mother felt the same but didn't know how to say it. He told me Chloe was struggling but was, for the first time in her life, standing on her own 2 feet. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't ask for money or help or even forgiveness. He just asked, "Would you be willing to meet for a coffee sometime? Just to talk." No expectations. I looked at Sarah, and she gave me a small, encouraging nod. This wasn't about going back to the way things were. That was impossible. This was about seeing if something new, something healthier, could be built from the rubble. "Yeah, Dad," I said. I'd like that. A week later, I met both my parents at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our homes. It was tense. My mother cried, but for the first time, her tears felt like genuine grief, not a tool of manipulation. We talked for over an hour. We didn't solve 30 years of dysfunction in one conversation, but we laid a single, new brick. I established a clear boundary. Our relationship from now on would be based on mutual respect, not on familial obligation or financial expectation. They agreed. It was a tentative beginning, a fragile truce, but it was a start. Looking back on that entire ordeal, it's clear that the confrontation at the party wasn't an end, but a beginning. It was the beginning of my real life. For so long, I had operated under a crushing weight of expectation and neglect, constantly striving for a crumb of approval from people who were incapable of giving it. Standing up to them wasn't an act of revenge, it was an act of profound self-preservation. It was me, finally declaring that I was the architect of my own life, and I would no longer allow anyone else to compromise my foundation. The relationship with my parents is slowly, cautiously rebuilding. It will never be the idyllic family portrait they once tried to paint, but it's something far more valuable. It's honest. We meet for dinner once a month. The conversations are sometimes still a little strained, but they are real. They ask about my life, my business, my marriage to Sarah. They listen. They don't ask for money, they ask for my time, and I give it when I can, on my own terms. My mother is learning to express her affection without it being tied to a request. My father, humbled by financial reality, now speaks of my success with a quiet, genuine pride, not as a resource to be tapped. As for Chloe, our relationship is still a work in progress. I learned she lost her receptionist job and is now waitressing. Life has forced upon her the independence our parents never did. We've exchanged a few brief, awkward text messages. There was a fumbled apology from her, more about her embarrassment than her actions, but it was a start. Maybe one day, we can be siblings again. For now, we are two separate people navigating the consequences of our shared history. The biggest lesson I learned through all this is that you cannot force people to see your worth. You have to see it in yourself, first and foremost. Your value is not determined by your utility to others. It's inherent. Building my company, my home, and my marriage was wonderful, but the most important thing I ever built was my own self-respect. That is the foundation upon which everything else now stands. True family, I've discovered, isn't about blood or obligation. It's about the people who show up, the ones who support you, respect you, and celebrate you without an agenda. It's my wife, Sarah. It's my mentor, Mr. Henderson. It's my crew, who have my back every single day. They are my chosen family, and their love is unconditional. The pain of the past hasn't vanished entirely, but it no longer defines me. It's just a part of my story, a chapter that led to a much better one. I am at peace. I am respected. I am free. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. My story is proof that it's never too late to tear down a toxic structure and build something beautiful and strong in its place. If this resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for your own worth against the people who were supposed to grant it freely, let me know your story in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button, because we all deserve to hear more stories about breaking free and building the life we deserve.